No, and I know when we come in on a Wednesday night and it's late and it gets dark early, and if you're anything like me, man, when it starts getting dark early, I start going down early. You know, I'm ready to be done. So I need a little something to help push and get me through. Thank you guys for being here tonight. For those of you that may not know, and I've had a lot of folks ask how my grandson is doing, Colton. Obviously, 3 weeks ago, it was right before, the week before Thanksgiving, had surgery up in Boston. Everything went well. Doctors were happy with how things went. Doctors were pleased with how that he's healing. He's having obviously some pains and struggles from it. He's in a cast, and so he's got to, he's 4 months old, and he's got to lay straight, and he can't move around and stuff. So that's, offers its own struggles and stuff. But just to give you an update, he is doing well. I thank you for your prayers. I thank you for asking. Thank you for your concerns, man. It's a true blessing to know, man, that something happens and I mess up and my prayer didn't get through, I can trust that yours did. You know what I mean? So tonight we're going to be looking at something a little bit different. I've listed, if you're interested, we're looking at this book. That's what we're going to be going through as I stand up here on Wednesdays for the next few times. It's called Unoffendable. And I've read through the book probably twice. I've listened to it. I'm on my 5th time now. And I just really love what this book is doing and how it's bringing out. And I wanted to share it with you. It's kind of one of those things where, if something really impacts you and makes a difference for you, then more than likely it's going to have an impact on the others. Before we get started and how we're going to try to lead up into this, kind of not long ago, I'm going to start in 2 areas and then draw them in together. Not long ago, I had an epiphany, a spiritual epiphany, if you will. Jesus has always talked about, in the Gospels, he's always talked about how that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The kingdom of heaven is here, right? And I always struggled with what does that mean? How can I bring that in and apply that? Because, I don't live in a kingdom. I don't have a king. So it's tough for me to really wrap my mind around that and how to truly understand and develop that and comprehend that. And I was sitting down here, man, a few Sundays ago, and it just kind of hit me, right? And so I'm going back and I'm trying to put myself obviously in that so that I can hear it their way. And so they were in kingdoms, and here's a kingdom, and there was always, it was kind of like those city-states of where, you'd have one kingdom, and then somebody would try, the other kings would get together, and they'd want to take over this one. So there was always that threat or always that worry that somebody was going to come in, they were going to invade you, or they were going to surround you, and they would kill off some people, and then they would bring in others, right? And we've seen that in the Old Testament, with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That was what happened. Babylon had come in, they take the youth, right? And then what did they begin to do? But they began to indoctrinate them into their system. So when the thought is, for them was whenever you knew that a kingdom was invading, then you knew the system of that kingdom was coming in to take over. So when Jesus said, and this is for me, this may be something totally, and everybody, all you guys might be saying, bro, we got that like in, Vacation Bible School. I'm a little bit behind. But it just kind of landed. It's like when Jesus kept saying, the kingdom of heaven, there's a new way. There's a new life. There's a new way of doing things. And I want to show you how to live this life. I want to show you what it means for God on earth and what it means to be part of the kingdom of heaven, to indoctrinate you. And I use that word because I know sometimes it has a stigma and it has a negative to it, but to indoctrinate you into the ways of God, into the things of God. And it really just hit me. I was like, yeah. And then Sean, not long ago, when he was going through Timothy, right? And we were in 2 Timothy, and this is where this comes in at. In 2 Timothy chapter number 2, Paul is saying, "Thou therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus. And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men, who shall be able to teach others also. When he was reading through that, unfortunately, like happens many a Sunday, so I'll get up here and he'll read something or he'll say something and I'll just get stuck in it. And my mind will just start thinking of other things. But when he read through that, and I imagined that somehow I was there, and maybe I was close, and maybe, Paul and Timothy are over here, and Paul's telling me, he's got his hand on his shoulder, and he's like, listen, man, you got to remember what I've done. You got to listen to the things that I've done, and you've got to take what you have heard of me, and you've got to give that to faithful men. You got to find some faithful men, some men that can teach these things, these same things. And I imagine, maybe it was, in one of the little places, the little cafes, or whatever. And I'm sitting over here, I'm like, I wonder if I would be one of those. I wonder if I would be one of those faithful men. I wonder if whenever Paul told Timothy that, did my name come up? Have I been proven to be one of those faithful men? One of the things that I thought about was, what would they look like? What would that be? And I think he gives us some of that. What would they not look like? And so in chapter 3, we get an idea of what I believe probably those faithful men would not look like. Starting in chapter 2, for men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. For of this sort they which creep into houses, lead captivity silly women, laden with sins, led away with divers lusts, ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. He's probably right there is giving us like, hey, Timothy, here's some of these guys that are not going to fall underneath that faithful men category. But I think he goes on, if you look back also in chapter 3, verse number 10, but this is what Paul says that I believe that as just from under this category of what faithful men would look like. Paul says, but thou hast fully known my doctrine, meaning you know what I've taught, you know my manner of life, you know my purpose, you know my faith, you know my long-suffering, you know my charity, you know my patience. And I believe Paul is probably, like I say, from the theater that I was presenting this, that was going on in my mind, I was thinking that probably this would be some of the things that he's like, remember, Timothy, these are the things that you're going to want to look for. These are the things that you're not going to want to look for. These are how these men are going to reveal themselves as to whether they are faithful men or not. And we are told in Romans chapter 12, 2, to be transformed, how? By the renewing of our minds. That transformed, it's where we get our word metamorphosis. It means a complete change. It means you were once one thing, and now you're being transformed into something else. He talks about being conformed. To be conformed means you become like where you are. You think about like water. No matter what you pour water in, it becomes whatever it is being put into. Right? It's like that of a chameleon, how it changes colors based off of where that it is. He's like, you're not supposed to be that way. I need you to be transformed. I need you to recognize, acknowledge, and accept you are a certain way. And now we are transforming you into something different. And that transformation is a process. You're going to become, it's kind of like that with the, where the caterpillar climbs up and it makes that cocoon and then the butterfly comes out, right? It's a process. So whenever you get saved, it's like you enter into that cocoon. And all for the rest of our lives, we're learning what that transformation is. And we're learning what it is of how God has taken His Word and He's revealing it to us of how we once were and how that now He wants us to be. That whole thing, and it's by the renewing of cutting my fingernails. It's the renewing of getting a new coat. It's the renewing of moving to another house. It's the renewing of getting a new car. It's the renewing of, I need you to get another job. None of that matters. It's the renewing of our minds. My wife hates it when I say this, but it's just mental. But to her credit, I've said it in some things, where he's talking about my daughter, going into labor and stuff. I was like, honey, it's just mental. It's like, it ain't just mental. This is just real. And so she's got pretty good cause for, but there is so many things, and even spiritually, that is mental. To have an understanding of ourselves and an awareness of ourselves. So I thought about, would I be considered a faithful man? Would I be considered mature, humble, loving, patient, enough emotional intelligence to acknowledge my own triggers when I'm easily annoyed, frustrated, or angered? So to encapsulate these traits into one phrase, am I easily offended? Yes. Yes. And I do not like saying that. And it has taken me 48 years, and I'm older than 48, but it's taken me about 48 years to come to that understanding that I am easily offended. And I've been working on that since the Lord has begun to show me that, and He's taken it, He's put me in kind of that velvet vice, if you will, and begin to squeeze me a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and showing me things and revealing things to me as I watch other people, as I watch other leaders, as I listen to other people, as I see things, and I'm like, man, you didn't handle that the way that I would have. And this is what the way that my mind works. I'm like, you would not have handled that the way that I would have handled that. But I'm looking at the results of the people around you, and those are the results that I desire. So what's going on within me? How am I not walking this walk correctly, right? And that is not good times. It's really not good times, especially whenever you get older, right? Because the older that we get, then the more kind of entrenched in our ways, and we've already discovered that this way works and this way doesn't work, and there's no need to try anything else, right? And then God steps in, He's like, well, you're still breathing, so we're still not done. And I say, well, I'm still breathing, so there's still hope. You can still work on me. So am I easily offended? When we're entering, when we're talking about this, if you're easily to be offended, a definition of this is to cause to feel upset, annoyed, resentful, angry because of perceived wrong, insult, or disrespect from something someone said or did. So today, it seems like that word offense, man, is just, it's taken to where you almost can't say it because it's been used so much, right? Well, that offends me. Well, that offends me. Well, that offends me, right? Today, we might use some different words. We might say, well, that ticked me off, or that irritated me, or I was just so aggravated, And in certain companies, maybe not in the church environment, you might even use that you were with the P word off, right? You get to the house or whatever, and you just, man, that just really yeah. But what if we could choose? What if we could choose to be unoffendable? What if we could choose to not be angry? Specifically, the presumption that I am entitled to be angry. There's a place for what we believe is called righteous anger. Is there a place? As Christians, we think that whenever we get saved, right, and we begin to learn to walk and stuff, and I'm not sure, man. I was kind of brought into this, and if anybody's been a Christian, for quite some time, you may be able to relate to this. But it seemed like for the longest time, and it seemed like what the church now is trying to fight is there was always this stigma that surrounded church as for being what we were against. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't go here. You can't go there. You can't be around those people. I remember the first time I heard this guy say this, and I thought I'd like, he said, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't chew, and I don't go out with girls that do. And I thought, well, you got a limited supply. You got a small market. But that kind of summed up how the church was. It was always what the church was against and what they couldn't do, you know. And somehow that we felt like the more self-righteous that we were, then the more attractive we would be to the world that was outside. Like, if you can just see how good I am, if you know how great that I walk with God, that would make you want to come to me. And that is so not true. That is so not. Do you know anybody, have you ever known anybody that acted that way, that had that kind of had that they were just better than them because they went to this church, or they were a preacher here, or they, were a Sunday school teacher there, or whatever, and they just seemed to have that self-right, and you're just like, man, I don't want to be around that. And we kind of just got into this place of where we were so against so much stuff. And we've kind of lost what it meant to have that grace, And that the first thing that he mentions there, therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus. We'll see this, and I'll mention a little, as we go through this book, but he mentions this in one part of the book of how Christians seem to be the only religion that whenever we get invited into the kingdom party, in the kingdom of God and kingdom of heaven, we get invited into that kingdom party, we want to set up more rules for why other people can't get in. Not realizing what we recognized and what it took for ourselves to get in. Because we think that somehow that makes us closer to God. That makes us more acceptable to God. Because He knows so much of what we're so against. And it's so turned the world against us. There's so many people that I talk to that's like, man, if I'll never darken the door of a church again because when I went in, they said this or they showed up that, or I've seen this happen and I've seen church people do this. And it's always, whenever I come in, they made a statement about my color. They made a statement about my gender. They made a statement about what I was wearing or what I should wear, or said that I couldn't sit up front unless I'm wearing this or unless I'm wearing that. And all of that. And like I said, I don't know when it started, but I do remember kind of that being given to me by thinking, man, that, when I could show people how much that I was against, they would know how close that I was to God. And when they knew that I wouldn't fellowship or that I wouldn't be a part of this group or I wouldn't hang around those people or I wouldn't talk to those, of just how much piety that I had. And then you start looking, man, and I can remember reading and it's like, well, but Jesus held out with publicans and with sinners. These are the houses that He went into. These are the places, these are people that He sought out to be with. I thought, man, something just don't seem to be lining up. As we look at this thing on choosing to be unoffendable and having that righteous anger, as Christians, are we supposed to get angry? Well, not only can we choose to be unoffendable, but we should choose it. We can and should choose to forfeit our right to be offended. It is a sacrifice pleasing to God, because it cuts pride, it denies ourselves, and it makes others it makes others the center of things. And so whenever I'm talking about this thing of being offended, right? When I realized for myself that I could take, when we talk about being offended and we talk about being angry, and I realized that I was a man that had 6 million annoyances, pet peeves, and that it seemed like each one of them was a hill that I was willing to die on, each one of them. And I just remember there was a guy that I worked with, and the first time I'd ever known this, but this dude embodied like 4,300,000 of my pet peeves. This one man did. I'm like, how is this possible that you've got so much stuff that you can so easily annoy me? I mean, he'd wear his glasses and he'd look down and he'd talk to me like this, and he'd talk so low that you couldn't even hardly hear him. You had to get right up on him, and stuff. And just so much stuff. And I just couldn't. I'm like, how could you have so much stuff? That just annoys the snot out of me, And then, and I remember, the preacher was talking about, when you recognize these things about yourself, right? Don't try to figure that. Step into that person. You want to make the devil mad? Then you step into that person. It's like, how you doing, man? You recognize that is you, that is your build, that is your triggers, that is just how you are, and you decide to step against it. Say, I'm not going to let this bother me. There's no reason that this should bother me. This man has done nothing to me. He's not insulted me. He's not offended me, really. It's just my own annoyance, right? There was a way, man, even for the longest time, even within my marriage, my wife was like, you think that if it's got to be done your way. If it's not done your way, then it's not right. I was like, you're finally getting it. Hallelujah. That only took 23 years. Now let's move forward on to something else, But she was right. She was right. I had a certain way that I felt like things should be done, and if they weren't done that way, then I needed to understand what happened. How come this didn't get done this way, It's like, you're just too rigid. And, and it's kind of like when you begin to hear those things, and then the Lord begins to show you that, not just maybe at home, but also in other areas, like, golly, now I got to say she was right. Now I got to be like, you know what, you were right. I'm too, I'm too rigid. I'm too easily annoyed, and I'm too ready to die on eating one of those hills, and I get too rigid. I get too offended. I allow that to offend me. Offense, being angered, that's an emotion, right? That's an emotion that has with it provides its own justification. Whenever I get angry, I feel justified for what I'm able to do, for how that manifests itself, right? I feel like I can manifest it through avoidance. Maybe I'm just not going to talk to you no more. You forget that trash, right? I feel like I can manifest it through rage, and then I can strike back. That anger just gives me that justification to do that. And whenever I'm not able to release that, then that turns into resentment. Jordan Peterson, I don't know I'm sure many of you are familiar with him, a psychologist, teaching psychologist. For the longest time, he said in his practice, as he would talk to married couples, he said the number one thing that destroyed relationships, as far as what he saw, it was not religion, it was not finances, it was not discipline of the children, it was resentment. Because resentment allows me to punish you for something that you did to me. When I hold on to that anger, and whenever I just continue to just let that harp, and I just let that meditate, and I just let that grow, and I just continue to let that do, now I'm justified in punishing you for how that you angered, or how that you hurt, or how that you offended me. And Ephesians says that we are to be angry, but sin not. I can appreciate that, where it recognizes that we are human, that these emotions that God given to us, that when we see wronged and we get upset by it, that it should motivate us to do something good about that, right? But that anger, it's not meant to motivate us in that time. It's meant for us to pause and consider. Okay, I see what's going on, and I see how that person is treating others, right? When we talk about it from that point of a righteous anger, of being upset, whenever we see, a homeless person beat down, or we see, domestic violence, or we see how a child's mistreated, or we see how a coworker's mistreated, or we see, all of these things, then that is to motivate, to get angry, but to motivate us to do something good. Because God said, He said, be angry and sin not. He said, let not the sun go down. It's like, you got to get rid of it. You got to get rid of it. Recognize it, acknowledge it, but it's got to go away. You can't harbor that. You got to have the conversation. You got to be able to control yourself, to self-regulate when you get upset, and it may take time. When I say that it took 48 years, that means that I have just started this journey. That doesn't mean that I've got it figured out. That means that I've just now started, like, okay, Lord, as we've heard a number of times, especially from Sean and from others, that repentance, it's daily. It's like, okay, God. The best definition that I heard of repentance is whenever you agree with God against you. That's a great definition. I love that. And it's whenever God begins to show, it's like, hey, man, you got a lot of annoyances, and you're willing to die on every hill of them, and the wrath of man does not work the love of God. So, and I need you to see, you've already called yourself a Christian, so there's a lot of people that's looking at you, so we're going to have to get that out of you, and I'm going to use a number of people in your life, within your home, outside of your home, all in your life, to show you that we need to work this out of you. And whenever those things just start popping up, and they start popping up, and then you have to repent, and you're just like, you know what, Lord? You're right. I agree with you against me. What do I need to do? How do I need to change? And that can be a difficult process. But acknowledging and recognizing that and stepping into it is the first step of all of it. Anger is much like, whenever I'm filled up with joy and I'm filled up with happiness, man, when I look at my grandkids, whenever I was holding Colton, man, and this brother's, 4 months old, and I think now he probably weighs 120 pounds, at least that's what he looks like. Looks like he got rubber bands on him, the fat's just rolling over, and he don't have jaws, he's got jowls, where his neck is, and you're just able to come in there and just dig up underneath that and just love, you know what I mean? That's an emotion too. And that's an emotion that justifies me being able to come up and kiss him. It motivates me to do something. But when I can step back and recognize, okay, what are my triggers? And whenever I think about all of my triggers, man, and whenever I get annoyed, all of the stuff, all of the energy that I put into that, all of the energy that I put, how many times, and maybe you're not like me, but think about how many times where somebody has cut you off in traffic. Somebody has stepped in front of you in the self-checkout line where everybody's got them now, right? And there's some of them there's one not far from the house. The self-checkout line's here, and then the main thoroughfare for the traffic is here. And so you got to stand in an aisle to let people go. Well, it's kind of hard to identify that. So somebody comes in, and that person, they get the green light, and now somebody comes in and rolls in, Lord, dog, I've been here for 10 minutes waiting on them to pack them eggs. And then you and so if you're anything like me, man, I'll run that one. I'll think about that all the way home. I'll think about that whenever I get to the house, and I'll just continue to chew, and it'll just pop back up, and I'll give that person a piece of my mind all the way to the house. Even the next day, I'll probably tell somebody at work about it, and I'll renew it, and I'll revive it, and I'll get angry again about it. The energy that it takes to do that, the energy, the mental energy, the physical, the stress, all the part of it takes of my body to do that. When I could have just, maybe they were in a bigger hurry. Maybe they were somewhere they had to be. Maybe they were picking up for something for somebody that was in the hospital, and they were taking them, but when I step back and I use that as an opportunity to practice forgiveness, it's gone. I ain't got to carry that no more. I don't have none of that weight. I don't have none of that stress. I don't have all joy and no stress, but I do have more joy and less stress. I ain't reached that point where it's all or nothing just yet. Main thing about my offense is, for whatever reason, I think that my offense are righteous, and I think that because my arguments tend to be right, because I'm right, right? I mean, I can justify all of my stuff. I know what my arguments are. I know how that my way was right and how that it should have been done. But unfortunately, you know, Proverbs 16:2 says, the ways of man are clean or right in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the spirits. The Lord weighs the reason. Right? Yeah, I don't know, you know, it also talks about whenever there's a case that's brought, don't hear just the first person. Be sure you hear both sides before you try to have a judgment, right? And me, well, that's what I do. I create this theater in my mind, right? And I'm the one bringing it. I'm the plaintiff. I'm telling why the defendant is wrong and why he's all jacked up, right? But I don't ever give them the opportunity to talk. I can talk for them, and I can create that conversation within my mind, and now I make myself right. And God comes in, he's like, well, you need to let you don't need to be talking for them. You need to let them talk for themselves. You don't even know what it was about. And you've run this into something that it never should have been. Anger is a feeling, it is an emotion, and it provides its own justification. It's not critical thinking. Anger does not pause. When you get angry, you pause. Whenever I get angry, I get upset, I'm not in the mood for, okay, let me think about that. I'm more like, let's go, you know. I'm more like, oh, you'll cut me off? Okay, watch this right here. Just to show you, okay, just to show you that there's a human being that stands up here before you, okay? I'm talking about I'm not even going to tell you how recent it was, because it may or may not have been on the way to church tonight. May or may not have been. It wasn't, but going down 321, and I really need a chauffeur just because I'm so prone to not be happy on the road. There was a vehicle in front of me. We were in the left lane, but that's the passing lane. That's not the cruising lane. That's the passing lane. For anybody that didn't know that, but so we're going down the road, and plenty of time for this car to have gotten over and allowed me to pass, right? But it was one of those times where they didn't, so I step out and I go to pass them. Well, as I go to pass them, they speed up. You're not going to pass me. I will run this truck up till it tacks out, but you are not going to pass me. And I know we're coming up on a stoplight. And I'm like, I'm not taking the risk of there being a line of cars up here, and then you get to pass me, and now I got to somehow pass you again. So I'm maintaining that distance, just so I know when I get to that stoplight, I get the opportunity to choose which lane that I want to get in, right? And so we're going down the road, and we come down here, and we start up a hill, and I look over to see where he is, and I look down to see where I'm running. I'm like, oh, well, okay, man, we'll run them. And then I look up, and I see blue lights. Dang. And I knew. I was actually on the phone with my wife, and I said, well, I got to go. I'm getting ready to get pulled over. It's like, what are you saying? I said, I'll have to call you later. It's like, this person was trying to pass me, and I was not going to let him pass me. It wasn't going to happen. And it was almost as, when I seen him hit the blue lights, I knew I was pulled over. So I slowed down, hit the blinker. He didn't even have to really pull out into the road much and then pull back into where that I was. But that person that was in the car I could hear them as they drove, giving it that. Pull in, but thank God for grace. Because this is when listen, thank God for grace. I had a state trooper tell me, and this may be true, I don't know, but I had a state trooper say not long ago, if you ever get pulled over and the weather conditions allow, roll your windows down, place your hands outside of the car, because he's coming up. He don't know. He sees you over here and you're messing in the glove box and all. He don't know what you're doing, man, and you need to provide a safe environment for him to step up to. And he said, so if he needs something from you, when he comes up to that car, he'll tell you what he needs, and then you can get it. But up to that point, if it's in the middle of the night, turn the interior light on, just put your hands in a place of where that he can see you. Let him know he is approaching a safe vehicle. It's like, bro, done. I love that, So I pull off, roll all my windows down, put my hands out the side, and I'm just waiting, man. Here comes this. And this dude comes up, and he says, boy, what are you doing? And it's a dude I used to go to church with. It's like, yes. I'm like, oh my God, it's so good to see you, man. I said, I'll let you know. I know, dude. He's like, bro, don't worry about it. Don't worry. I say, okay, thank God. Oh, I was like, how you been, man? God, you look so good. You've been lifting weights. God, you're so trim, man. How's the family doing? God, I hope y'all are doing good. I hope both sides of your pillow are cold every night, sir. Every night. So I'm still working. I'm still a work in progress. There's still things, man. But you know something that I have noticed, and I tried this just to kind of test myself. Where I will leave here and I'll get on 321 and I will get in the right-hand lane and never get over. However fast or slow that vehicle in front of me is going, that's where I'm going to stay. I'm just going, and I will chew my teeth up the whole time, just like that. I'm not getting over. I'm making myself, I'm forcing myself to not allow myself to do that. And I have noticed so many times that whenever I do that, then whenever I get home, I'm in such a better mindset. I just like, you know what? May only be doing 53, but it's faster than walking, and it's cold outside. So I'm just gonna maintain 53, and I'm gonna turn up some no joy and no stress. We're coming into a season, man. We're coming into where we're going to be around friends. We're going to be around family that maybe we haven't seen often. We're going to be in shopping malls. We're going to be in grocery stores where they're going to be full. We're going to come upon cashiers. We're going to come upon waiters and waitresses that their last table they spent 2 hours with had 3 kids, knocked over every drink, and they left them a $2 tip and a pamphlet and say, come see us at church, There's going to be those and we're going to get that one, and they're going to come to us, and they're going to be upset, and they're going to be frustrated. That way, and we have the opportunity to, regardless of however they treat us, to not let that offend us, to not give that person a reason to look bad on Christians. We have an opportunity, right? And when we step out of here and we go into these, and we know we're getting ready to go in, and sometimes you may not even be able to recognize it, man. You may get into it and you may be, oh, okay, no, that's right. I'm going to woosah. And just pause. I'm just going to choose not to get upset. And may I be late, might I be late for the dinner? I might be late for the dinner. You know what? But that's okay. I'm going to recognize, even if it's not necessarily to reveal Christ, but for my own self, to recognize my own triggers and to decide I'm not going to be offended. I'm not going to let this upset me to the point of that it ruins my day. I mentioned this one time before. A guy that I work with, his wife said, did you have a bad day? Or did you have a bad 5 minutes that you let ruin your day? I said, oh, Lord. I said, bro, you need to get a divorce. That's not what I said. I said, that's pretty awesome, man. I said, I really like that. It's impressive that your wife would think that. But we're going into that, man, of where, we're going to be around those people. We're going to be around those family members that, maybe at Thanksgiving, things got tore up, or they're going to, that whenever you see them, they're going to jab you about, well, I can't believe that you done this, or that you voted for them, or that you pull for this team, or that you drive this kind of truck, or that you didn't, you took this job, or that you were, we know those conversations are coming, and we can step in and say, you know what, you're right, man, I just decided I'm not going to let that upset me. All right, how you been doing? I'm glad. Yeah, I'm pulling for your team, man. They're doing, and we just decide, and we choose to be unoffendable. I would challenge you to test that. There's going to be plenty of opportunities. As soon as we walk through those doors, there's going to be an opportunity to choose to not be offendable, to choose to let the grace of God work in your life and let others see that work in your life. Pastor?
Thank you, Randall. How true that is. Lord to help you on. We're going to close out prayer, and you just draw a circle around yourself. And he's making fun. I love how you can do that, when you can talk about it, but the road is actually a great place to know how offended you are. We like, but it is. That's just one little thing that you know you're probably offended everywhere you go. You know how I know that? Because I'm that same person who gets in that right-hand lane every now and then and say, I'm going to test myself out. And the Lord can really help us. So let's draw a circle around ourselves tonight as we close. Father, thank you for this word tonight. How true it is. And God, you want to mature us. You want us to, as we draw a circle around ourselves, really what we're saying is we understand that life is not circle around us. God, that we want to understand that actually we want to invite you into our circle, that you're actually the center of the universe. That all things by you consist. And so, God, whatever the offenses are in our lives that maybe we can't get past, that this truth tonight that Randall shared with us, and that your grace is big enough to help us to deal with those things, that you can transform our lives continually, even in the state of transformation tonight, and that we can be conformed into your image. Jesus, we see how